Hey guys, today I want to go ahead and talk about graphing the sine wave. And if you notice here, we're going to start off with the unit circle, okay? Because the way we graph these, we derive it from the unit circle. And you notice that the unit circle has to do with these corner points, okay? 1 unit long, 1, comma 0, negative 1, comma 0. Up here at 0, comma 1, down here 0, comma negative 1. So the first thing is when you draw your x and y axis, okay? Notice that when we're graphing trig functions, the x-axis is no longer your typical x-axis. It's the radians now, okay? So we start off with 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and then we get back to 2 pi. So that's what your x-coordinates are going to be at, okay? That's what your x-axis, quote-unquote, would be. And then for your sine, to graph your sine function, you're going to look at the second coordinate here. If you notice, at 0, we start off at 0. Then when we get to pi over 2, we reach 1. And then when we get to pi, we're at 0. And then when we go back, get to 3 pi over 2 over here, we get to negative 1. And then we get up to 2 pi, we're back at 0. So you get this wave here, and we call it the sine wave. Okay? And so where do we get these points? We get them from the unit circle. 0, then goes up to 1, then goes back to 0, goes down to negative 1, and then back up to 0. And we call this, because it does one turn around the circle, we call it one cycle or one period. Okay, and there's a couple of vocabulary terms that you need to know for these. The first thing is the midline. The midline is this horizontal line, okay, that separates, that kind of cuts the function. But it oscillates, it goes up and down between this midline, and that's what the midline means. And that's important when we start talking about graphing it. The second thing is amplitude. Amplitude is this distance here, is the distance from the midline all the way up to the highest peak, or the lowest peak, which we can call a trough. Okay, so from here to here, the highest peak is, okay, the amplitude. Same thing over here, okay. This is a trough because it kind of like a cave, like a trough, like a feeding trough of an animal, okay? And that's the amplitude. The period, we already talked about it, is the one turn around the circle, okay? It takes one turn, one cycle, and that's how we get this wave. So we call this one cycle or one period. And the period is going to be 2 pi because that's how long it takes for us to get all the way back around. It takes 2 pi radians. Okay, and from there I want to give you guys an idea of what the standard form is going to look like for these sine functions. Today we're just working on sine, and then in the next video we'll talk about cosine. But it's much the same, and this is a general form. There's a number going to be here in the front of the sine. That's going to give you your amplitude. The number in front of the x, whatever this value is here, that's going to determine your period. Your C is your horizontal shift. So what you're going to do is you're going to take this whole thing on the inside, okay? You're going to solve it, and that's going to tell you how much you have to shift it left or right. And then this guy out here, the number on the outside, is your vertical shift. It moves it up or down, okay? So let's go ahead and take a look at an example and how do we graph these, okay? So the first thing you want to do is when you graph your x and y axis is you want to graph your midline. That's the first thing you want to do. From there, I forgot to put it here, but you want to know your amplitude. In this case, your amplitude is 3. So actually, I would say my amplitude is 3 right here. Okay, that's how high it's going to go up from the midline, okay? Your period is given by this equation. The period is equal to 2 pi over b. Is it always going to be 2 pi? Yes, because remember, when we're talking about the unit circle, it takes us one turn, okay, it takes us 2 pi radians to get all the way around. So that's why we use 2 pi. Over b, so whatever's in front of this x value, that's what we're going to put right here. After that, we're going to plot the 4 quadrants, or the 4 sections. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you take a look at the unit circle from here to here, that represents one quadrant. And then this is the second quadrant, the third quadrant, and then the last quadrant. Okay? And that's what we want to do. And then from there, we're going to use the pattern, okay? the up-down pattern. Now remember, cosine starts at 1, but sine starts at 0. So what's the pattern that I'm talking about? Well, 0 up to the amplitude, midline, amplitude, midline. And then it just keeps continuing with that pattern. And lastly, your shift, or how much are we going to shift it if necessary. Now, the more we do these, the better we'll get at them, just for practice. But I just want to get, hopefully you get the gist of how to graph these. So I already started kind of graphing it, just for sake of time, just to help you guys out. The first thing is you want to do is you want to label all your tools that you're going to be using. So the first thing is your midline, +1. So that means the midline is at 1, and it's right here. Okay. Now your period, okay, your period is 2 pi over b. So what you do is you take your 2 pi divided by b. Well, what's that b value? Whatever's in front of the x. Well, what's in front of the x? A 1. So it's 2 pi. So what do I do with this guy? This guy goes all the way at the end. That's where you put it, okay? And that's what it means. Well, how do I get these 3 values, right? Well, that's your 4 quadrants or your 4 sections. So you're going to take your period, whatever this value is, you're going to divide it by 4 because there's 4 quadrants. So when you do that, you're going to get pi over 2. That means each section you're going to be counting by pi over 2. So you're going to count 1 pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, 4 pi over 2, which is the same thing as 2 pi. And of course, you notice right here I didn't reduce it, but you should. But I just want to give you an idea of how we count. It's just counting like numerically 1, 2, 3, 4. And lastly, your horizontal shift. Whatever's inside here of this parentheses, you're going to set it equal to 0 and you're going to solve it. And in this case, we get x equals pi. That means because it's positive, we're going to move it pi units to the right. So let's go ahead and graph this one. First thing I did is my midline. Okay, so now I got my period and got my 4 quadrants. Good. So now I'm going to start with my pattern. Remember, this is sine. So where does sine start? It starts on the midline. So I'm going to start right here, right there. Do I always start there for sine? Yeah, wherever the midline's at. In this case, it's up here. In the next problem, it'll be down here. But here's the midline. Okay, so then what do? By the time I get to pi over 2, I need to get to the amplitude. What's the amplitude? 3. So from here, I'm going to count 3 units. So 1, 2, 3. That is 4. So right here is going to go up 4 right there. Okay. And then after the amplitude, I go back to the midline here in the center, right here, second section, the second quadrant. Okay. Then from here, I'm going to go down. By the time I get to 3 pi over 2, I'm going to go down to the midline. So from here, I'm going to count down 3 spaces. 1, 2, 3 right here. And that is -2. So here, we're going to end up right here. And then the last one, we go back up to the midline right here. So you get this curve right here. Okay. Kind of like this. Nice. Okay. Nice. There it is. The last thing I got to do is my horizontal shift. Am I moving it left or right? In this case, I'm moving it to the right. How many? I'm moving it pi units. So this guy is going to move pi units. So that means from here, not to here, or actually all the way up to here. Okay, and that's what I'm doing for each. So I got to extend this guy. So how do I do that? Well, I just keep counting. 1, 2, 3. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4. This would be 5 pi over 2. And then 1, 2, 3, 6 pi over 2. And then you can see I ran out of room. But that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and use this guy. So this guy's going to move pi units to the right. So 1, 2 is going to be right here. This guy's going to move pi units. So this guy's going to go 1 and 2 right here. This guy's going to move pi units. 1, 2 right here. This guy's going to move pi units. 1, 2 right here. And the last one, this one's going to move pi units. 1, 2 right here. So then I get my curve here, goes up, then goes back down, continues, keeps going there, and goes back up. Cool. And you see how it shifts the black line over to the red line. And that's it. Now the last thing I want you guys to do is to be able to verify. Well, how do I do that? Well, let's pick any of these points, okay? This guy here is, this point is 3 pi over 2 comma 4. So the x is 3 pi over 2, the y is 4. So that means when I plug this guy into here, I should get a 4. So I'll just go ahead and do it real quick here. 3 times sine. Instead of x, I'm going to put 3 pi over 2 minus, instead of pi, I'm going to use I'm going to use 2 pi over 2. Because 2 pi over 2 is the same thing as pi. And then that's plus 1, okay? So 3 pi over 2 minus 2 pi over 2, well, that's 1 pi over 2. So I get that. 3, okay, plus 1. All right, so what's sine of pi over 2? Well, let's see. If you remember your unit circle, here's pi over 2, right? What's a sine? It's right there. That's 1. Okay. So sine of pi over 2 is 1. That means we get 3 times 1. So 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4. Cool. Hey, that's the correct point. So I graphed it correctly. All right, guys, let's go ahead and see if we can do a couple more here, just to give you an idea. All right, first thing, midline, -3. So 1, 2, -3 is right here. And I want to go ahead and draw my horizontal, my new midline, okay? My new midline right here, just dotted lines. Okay, and what's my amplitude? Is going to be 2. What's my period? You take 2 pi divided by b, whatever that number in front of the x. So what's in front of the x? Nothing. It's a 1. Cool. And we're just going to leave it as a 1 for right now in these, because we're just learning how to graph these. So your period is 2 pi. So that means by the time I get over here, I should be at 2 pi. So, well, how do I do that? Well, I just want to kind of simplify this or break it up into 4 nice sections. So we'll do, this is 0. So let's go 1, 2, 3. That'll be my first section. 1, 2, 3. My second, 1, 2, 3. My third, 1, 2, 3, right here. So right here, by the time I get to here, it should be at 2 pi. Okay, my wave. Okay, so well, what about these 3 sections? Well, you're going to take 2 pi. Okay, you're going to divide it into 4. That means you're going to get pi over 2. That means each section, okay, this guy is going to be pi over 2. This guy is going to be 2 pi over 2. The next one is 3 pi over 2. And the last one is 4 pi over 2, which is the same thing as 2 pi. Okay? That's how I get my 4 sections there. Now, what's my horizontal shit? Well, I take whatever's inside here. I'm gonna move it. Let me see, x plus pi over 2 and set that equal to 0. When I solve it, you're gonna move this guy to the right. You're gonna get x equals negative pi over 2. That means it's going to move pi over 2 units to the left because it's a negative. And that's okay. That means we're going to have to extend this guy here. Let's see here. 1, 2, 3. Right there. And So this guy over here, this would be negative pi over 2. And I'll just leave it like there. Hopefully I have enough room. Good. So I got my quadrants, I got my section. So now I'm going to go ahead and start my pattern. Okay, so remember, this is sine. So where do I start? I start at 0. I'm not going to start here. I'm going to start right on the midline right here. Right there. So then, what do I do now? I start off at 0 or midline, and then I go to where? Amplitude. What's the amplitude? 2. So from the midline, you're going to go up 2 units. So 1, 2. So 1, 2 is right here. Okay, what about the next one? Then amplitude, then you go to midline. And then you go down to the amplitude. So go 1, 2. 1, 2, right here. And then you go back up to the midline, right here. So you get this curve right here, looks like this. Okay. A little bit flatter than the one we did before, not as high. Okay, and that's it. But the last thing we got to do is we got to move it negative pi over 2 units to the left. So this guy is going to move to the left pi over 2. So this guy is going to go over here. This guy is going to go over here on the 0. This guy is going to go here on the pi over 2. This guy is going to go on the pi. And then this guy is going to go on the 3 pi over 2. So then you have this guy here. And normally your professor is only going to expect you to graph one of these. Okay. And that's it. And if you can see, it shifted pi over 2 units to the left. And if I go ahead and let's say I pick this point right here, this is pi over 2 comma, what is that? 1, 2, 3, negative 4. So if I plug in pi over 2 into this guy, I should get negative 4. So if I do that real quickly, 2 times sine of pi over 2 plus pi over 2, take away 3. So pi over 2 plus pi over 2, that's 2 pi over 2, which would be sine of pi. Okay. 1 pi over 2 plus 1 pi over 2 is like 1/2 plus 1/2 is 1 whole. Okay. So now we get sine of pi. Cool. Where's pi at? Well, pi is right here. What's the sine value? 0. Okay. So that means this becomes 0. Okay. And 2 times 0 minus 3. Okay. And 0 minus 3 is negative 3. And does anybody see my mistake? Yes. Look at this. This is my point, right? So what is that number? Negative 3. Sorry, guys. I don't know why I put negative 4. This should be negative 3 right there. Okay. So pi over 2 comma negative 3. So that's exactly what I got. I did it right. So let's go ahead and see if we can do one more. Nice and easy. Now sometimes these problems, you don't have to get a pi, but that's okay. And that's okay. You just continue the same process. So let's go ahead and see. Let's do this one. What's our midline? Positive 2. Okay, positive 2 is right over here. So we'll just do dot, dot, dot. Okay. Okay. Positive 2. And what's our amplitude? Is 1/2. So this one's really going to be kind of flat. And then our period is 2 pi divided by b, whatever is in front of that, x, which is 0.1, in this case still 0.1. Okay, that means we're going to end up with 2 pi. So now I want my section. So let's see here. Let's see. I know I start off here. This is 0. 1, 2, 3. That's going to be 1, 1, 2, 3. That's another section. 1, 2, 3. That's another section. 1, 2, 3. And here. Okay. So by the time I get to this last part, I should have one wave. Right here is 2 pi. Okay, cool. What are my 4 quadrants, my 4 sections? You take your period, 2 pi, divide it into 4 because there's 4 sections. And that's going to give you pi over 2. So we're counting. So this is pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, and then 4 pi over 2. So that's these sections right here, okay, guys? That's what these are right here, the same ones, okay? I just wrote them down here just so it won't be so bunched up. Lastly, a horizontal shift. So what do? You take this guy, okay? You take this guy and you're going to set it equal to 0. So x minus 1 equals to 0. So then x is equal to 1. That means we're going to move a 1 unit to the right. Okay, 1 unit to the right. And you know what? I think I'm going to go ahead and change this guy here just to keep it nice and simple. Let's go ahead and change it because I saw something. Let's just go ahead for this one. Let's just change it into pi over 2. Pi over 2. So for this one, we're going to make it into pi over 2. And the reason is I should have changed the period in the front, but I didn't see that. But it's okay. I'll do one example like that in the next video. So we'll just keep it like we've been doing. Okay. So we got our amplitude, we got our period, we got our 4 quadrants. I just changed it from a 1 to a pi over 2, and it's okay. Just to keep it nice and simple. We solved this, moved it to the right. We got our 4 sections. Now, okay, we're going to go ahead and start graphing it. So, again, this is sine. So where do I start? I start at 0, or I start on the midline. Here's my midline right here. So from right here. All right, what do? By the time I get to here, I should go up to the amplitude. So what's my amplitude? Half. Well, let's just say that's 3, so it can give me a little bit of room. So this guy is half. So from here, I'm going to go up here. Okay. And then I go to the next quadrant. I get to the midline. And then I get to the next quadrant. I should go to the amplitude. So let's say this is... This is not going to work, is it? Because you see here, I made it from here to here. I made it. That's 1. That's 2. Let's see here. We're going to have to make this guy. Let's say this guy is 3, right? So we're just going to have to make it half is right there. right in the middle half there. And that's okay. Sometimes with these fractions, it's hard to scale them, but that's okay. So here, you notice up I only went half a unit. So from here, I'm going to go from here, right? Midline, amplitude, midline, and then here amplitude. So I'm only going to go half a unit. So right about here. Here. It's going to look a little bunched up, but that's okay. And then we go back up to the midline. So it's going to look something like this. Pretty flat, but that's okay. You see how it's flattened out. And that's what happens with the amplitude. The amplitude makes it flatten out or expand wider. So now we have that. Okay, so now the last thing we got to do is move it pi over 2 units to the right. Because when I solved it, it became a positive. So this guy is going to go here. Okay, so let's see here. Let's go ahead and expand it just a little bit. 1, 2, 3. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4 pi over 2. This is 5 pi over 2. All right, so now this guy here, I'm going to move it pi over 2 units. So this guy is going to go here. This guy is going to go here. This guy is going to go here. This guy is going to go move it pi over 2. And this guy move it pi over 2 here. So then this guy is going to do this. Oof. Down. And then go back up. And if you notice, you can see how it moved pi over 2 units. So hopefully, guys, that makes some sense and you're able to just get the gist of how to graph these sine waves and trig function. Next time, we'll work on some more difficult problems. All right, guys, good luck.